everyone, and we're back with our final guest, Khoi Vinh, who's the current Senior Director of Design at Adobe. So for those who are not familiar with his biography, before Adobe, Khoi was actually held multiple leadership positions at companies such as the New York Times and his own startup. He's also been publishing his thoughts on culture and design on his blog Subtraction for over 20 years. And you might notice that Sean is not with me right now, and that's because he will hop on in 15 minutes to deliver some questions from the audience. All right, so let's jump into our Fireside chat and welcome Khoi Vinh to the UXVN stage.
Hello.
Hello, good evening, Khoi. Yeah, thank you so much for hopping on again with us to do this. And yeah, I think the fact that we are now meeting in the new year give us the perfect opportunity to just reflect on 2020. And we're curious to know, looking back at the past year, we can all agree that so much has happened. Like, what has been your biggest takeaway from everything that went on?
A great year. No, it was terrible, and hopefully this new year is going to be better. But I think looking back on 2020, I think the thing that strikes me is, for designers who are lucky to stay engaged with work, to remain employed, we're very, very fortunate. We have jobs, we have this profession where we don't need that much to perform our duties, and we can do our jobs from nearly everywhere, and we don't necessarily have to put ourselves in in harm's way or expose ourselves to dangerous environments. And I think that's something that I really try to take stock in and be grateful for in last year, because I know a lot of people were not as fortunate. And so, in many ways, design is a profession of great privilege. And so there's a lot of responsibility there too, for us to do good work and make a difference.
Yeah. I think that, perfectly. One of my questions, we'll maybe hop on that topic in a bit, was regarding like how you see changes that will happen coming next. But before we jump into that, could you give us a little background into how you've grown throughout your career? Like, I know you started in graphic design and then moved on to multiple leadership positions, the startups and stuff like that.
Yeah, I started in branding and identity and quote unquote print design or analog design, graphic design, but I really sort of see it all as the same, as a continuum. And I think that if you have that mindset as a designer, that you are solving problems regardless of the medium and regardless of the technology, that's going to serve you really well. And that's been the case for me in my career. Rather than thinking, I'm only this kind of a designer, it's much better to think like, I should be able to solve any kind of problem, with the right research, with the right study, with the right time, patience, and humility. So I started doing design in a small design studio, actually just outside of Washington, D.C. after I got out of school. And then I went to work at a design agency and then started an agency of my own. And then I went to work at the New York Times for about 5 years to lead design there for their digital properties. And then went off to do a startup and then got really involved in the startup and technology world, and then came to Adobe about 5 years ago to build tools for people like ourselves, UX designers, or really and all kinds of designers. And so I think the constant through all of that is just being curious about design in all different kinds of forms and all different kinds of media, and thinking of myself as a designer, not necessarily a specialist, but a design generalist.
Amazing. So yeah, you like on that note, you mentioned about curiosity, and I know you also dabbled in multiple forms of content creation outside of your day-to-day role. And just curious how things like your blog, your podcasts, how they fit into your work and day-to-day.
Yeah, I think I think for me, like, design is a huge subject matter with all different kinds of angles to it. Whether you're a practitioner or you're a critic or you're a consumer or you're a stakeholder or a client, there's lots of different angles on design. And I've tried to explore as many of them as I can. And I found that it's been really useful to think that there are other ways of engaging with design that are not just sitting there doing design for yourself or for a company or for a client. And writing about it and working out ideas has been one of the, I think, the biggest aids to my career, really trying to engage with design from a whole different perspective and ask questions and really have a spirit of inquiry. And then recently I've been hosting this podcast, Wireframe, which is all about how design shapes technology to fit into our lives, and then going out and finding stories, real practical stories where that happens, and trying to bring the voices together. That's a different way of like really figuring out for myself like what is design and where is it going, what it's becoming. So for me, it just comes from just being enthusiastic about design from every angle and really wanting to look at it from every possible angle.
Yeah, awesome. And yeah, I love that you mentioned Wireframe, because one of our next question was regarding like how did the idea of Wireframe come about? Like what was the origin story behind that?
Yeah, I think in some ways it's the same origin as my blog and my writing, like the books I've written or the speaking that I do. It's all about really trying to understand design better for myself, but also understand design through telling stories about design and helping make design understandable to other people. And I think that's one of the most important things that designers can do, is really try to make our work and our craft and our methods more relatable to people who are not already clued into the language of design, people who are not, designers themselves or work in design environments. So if we can help tell stories where people can say, oh, I actually see now how design played a role in making this product or making this service or helping me to figure out a problem in real life or causing a problem in real life. That's really, really valuable. And that was the inspiration of what we were trying to do, what we continue to try to do with Wireframe, is to help people understand how design plays a role in their lives, whether they're conscious of it or not, or whether they really understand it or they don't. And our trick, so to speak, is to put together these stories that are very highly produced and very professional and actually sound like a podcast that you might hear from, like a professional, radio source or something, or we tell stories about design in the way you might hear stories about business or culture or sports or the arts. And people kind of aren't used to hearing about design in that way, because design is generally only designers talking to each other about it. But this is design expressed in a way that's very welcoming and open to everybody, and so we try to draw them in with these really compelling stories and then help them understand design better and appreciate design. And I think that when you do that, when you help people understand design, that it makes more people appreciate the work that you do, and it makes your work more valuable.
Yeah, amazing. And I think most people don't realize that design is everywhere, whether you see it or not. And I think that the fact that the podcast is so topical is one of my favorite aspects, covering even latest really relevant things like election design to COVID-19. And so you're now on.
Most people don't know what design is at all. It's just like this word, and they know that people think it's important, but they can't describe it. And when they try to describe it, they end up talking about technology or about business or something like that. But if they get enough exposure to it, then they start to understand design, and it opens up a whole new world for them. And the more of those people out there, people who are not designers already, the more of those people who really start to understand what design is and value it, that's going to help us all do better design work. That's my belief.
Yeah. And so you're now on your on season 3, and the podcast was launched in 2018. And yes. So been 2 years in the making. And have you had any major breakthrough or like takeaways that in the past 2 years?
Well, we're actually just starting production on season 4 now, and that'll be out later this year. And the big revelation to me is how hard it is to do a really good podcast, because there's a ton of podcasts out there about design, and they're great. Actually, I'm a big fan of most of them. I mean, a lot of them, but most of them, it's one person interviewing another person over, Zoom or Skype or something, and it's just like a Q&A session. It's usually just about like person tells their career story and what they're working on. That's fine. What we do instead is really try to take a story, a slice of a story, and bring in the right people. So it's like the story first, and the people come in and complement the story. They help tell that particular story. And that's a lot harder because you have to research, you have to interview, you have to schedule them to get on the line with you, record them, mix it together. You have to then refine the story, edit it over and over again, and then do all this production work. It's really a lot of work. And I think the audience hears that, they appreciate that, because we do all that hard work so that it's easy and pleasurable and fun to listen to a podcast about design.
Yeah, no, I think definitely. Like I was listening to the episode on the impact of COVID-19 on the way designers think, and like I think being able to bring multiple perspective, like different kinds of designer into that story really is helpful. And I think for big social problems or like COVID-19, we're gonna have to get a multidisciplinary perspective on these issues. And so just on that, like going forward as we now move into like the new normal, like what areas of change are you most, do you feel like are the most urgent and needed?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've done so much over the past decade in perfecting the tools and the methods for consuming digital products and media and services. We've made it easier to do that, right? And we have all these best practices, and there's all this stuff that you can go online and find out, like what's the best way to convert somebody, like from a prospect to a paying customer. What's the best way to prolong their session, all this stuff, like all these great tools and approaches to making things easier to consume. And I think just given the events of the past, just even the past week, I think it's obvious now that we have to go beyond that and develop ways to help design experiences that are more meaningful to people. And when I say meaningful, not just that they like more, but also that creates true value and helps them understand, the true context of what they're consuming. Like, it can't just be about like liking something, on social media, like and maximizing the number of likes. It's also got to be like really understanding like is it a truthful statement? Is it like who is it attributed to? What's the time dimension? What's the impact on like the world outside of just me and my office or my desk or my room? And I think there's a lot of work to be done there to make design more comprehensive, to understand the context better, and make design more responsible for helping people really derive the right meaning from their engagements with digital media.
Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of designers nowadays, in the context of everything, feel like they have a responsibility to like do more and like provide more value, but also like drive change. But like at the same time, it's like there's so much happening, and like it's overwhelming just processing news like each week. And is there any advice that you want to give to designers who obviously now want to up level themselves, but then just trying to at the same time like deal with everything that's going on?
Yeah, I think it's hard because I think the kind of change that we need in design is hard. It's kind of change that's difficult to bubble up from below. Like there are really some top level changes that need to be made to the way designers are incentivized to work to achieve. But as a designer, you can certainly be responsible in terms of how you decide to spend your time as a person, right? I mean, there's a lot of designers out there who are trying to do the best possible job, but maybe working for a client, for a company in a way that is not necessarily contributing to a net positive for the world at large. And so as a designer, you have to like have those questions and or have those conversations with yourself about like, is this what I'm doing really contributing to something more meaningful? And you have to decide for yourself. I mean, I think we've all seen over the past several years that the digital tools that we create, they are meaningful. We've always said like this stuff matters and it really can create change. And that also means if it can create change for the good, it also means that it can create change for the worse. And we've seen that happen. And so you have to decide, am I going to work on the stuff that's actually going to produce a net positive change, or am I going to work on stuff that's going to produce a net negative change? And I think there are a lot of designers out there who I think it's important for them to have that conversation with themselves.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I think that's the end of all the questions we have for you. I know Sean has a bunch that the audience has typed away on the day. Thank you so much, and I will pass the stage over to Sean.
Hi, Khoi. It's nice to see you again.
Yeah.
So I've been backstage composing questions from our audience, and there are some amazing questions. First, I really like the parts that you talked about the design inclusivity. It's really sticking to me because I think this is what's really helping people especially with challenges when designers working with other non-design party, especially when it comes to decision making in the products. And I believe that one of the most important qualities for a good design lead. So to our first question, what do you think about a good design lead, how to be one, and specifically, what is your day-to-day jobs managing such a large team in Adobe?
So I'm sorry, it's a little hard to hear, but I think the question is about being a design lead and what the day-to-day is like. Is that right?
Yeah. So maybe let me just adjust my headphone a little bit, if it's okay.
I mean, I think if the question is, what is the day-to-day experience of being a design lead? I mean, I can speak to it from the perspective of being in an organization like Adobe, where we've got, like lots of product teams, lots of designers. We've got hundreds of designers and lots of program managers and engineers and marketers and digital strategists. And so for a lead, what you do is you spend your day really trying to create the conditions for good design to happen. So whether you're at the lead level or manager level or design level, you're really just trying to ensure that good design decisions can be made and that you can avert bad design decisions. And that means taking part in like all the right meetings and connecting with all the right people and doing your research and preparing your team or your design colleagues with the information that they need to have in order to pull off the right design accomplishments. And it means thinking more deeply about the problems that are handed to you than a product manager or an engineer might expect you to. You really have to think really about the problem from a 360-degree perspective, and pull in the right people to help fill in all the pieces and stuff. And so it can be really challenging because so much of what we do is interconnected, and there are so many interdependencies and so many services and pieces of technology that need to connect with each other. But it's also really exciting, really fun and fascinating to sort of like figure that stuff out and bring clarity to complexity.
So I think one of the parts of being a good design lead is you have to manage the complexity of the whole spectrum of the design problems, because you're not only working with the design teams, you need to work with other teams that from another, for example, non-design team, for example. So you need to be a middle person that connecting all people together, to solve the one common problem.
Yeah.
So the challenge then, so what do you think about the challenge when you face building design cultures and advocating for good design in these different environments?
Yeah, I think design culture is really important because there are very few places where the design culture flourishes naturally all by itself. It really takes dedication and perseverance on the part of the designers and on the parts of the partners of the design team too. They have to be on board as well. It's easiest to build a design culture when you have an understanding and a belief in the value of design from the very top, right? Like if you've got somebody who is leading the company and really understands the role that design can play, it's vastly easier than if you've got somebody who just doesn't really understand design at all and then just sort of delegates it like to some mid-level leader and doesn't really take it into account. That's really, really difficult. And I've been in those situations, at some of the smaller companies that I've worked with, or even bigger companies, and also companies that I've consulted with, where there just really isn't an understanding of design, and it's just a very difficult challenge to do that. I mean, you can, in those instances, you can really just try to get the design team to really stick together and to feed each other and to take on, the extracurricular work of bringing in, influences and readings and inviting people to talk or going out to conferences and stuff like that. And I wish there was a way to do it to bring a design culture up entirely from the grassroots and really have it take over the company. But I think it's from past experience, it very rarely happens that way on a sustainable basis.
So you think finding the right person, especially in the leadership positions, when it comes to decision making, that people that are really sympathetic to a good design and understand that design is one of the most important factors for a successful product or successful design, a successful company is very crucial for building a flourish design cultures. So what do you think about others problems like social problems and business problems that can be solved by design? How do you approach them?
Well, I think on the one hand, it's really good to look any problem from the perspective of a designer and say, if I research that problem enough, if I ideate on it enough with the right people and the right environment, and if I then iterate on it and continually, validate my assumptions and then re-examine them over and over again, then I can solve any problem. And I think there's a certain amount of truth, or at least a certain amount of power to that. Like anything that you don't know about, you can sort of solve from the perspective of a designer. But I think it's also really important to approach those problems with humility and understanding that you are not going to be able to solve everything just because you're a designer. You need to partner with the people who are sort of native subject matter experts and really understand their perspectives and really try to build solutions or try to design solutions that are balanced and really considerate of not just primary users, but secondary users, tertiary users, and think about all the downstream effects of the solution that you're proposing as well. So, in short, bringing a design perspective, design thinking, whatever you want to call it, to any problem is great, but it's also not the end of the story. There's a lot more that every designer and every problem solver needs to take into account in order to build a solution that is truly useful, truly helps, people.
Yeah, I believe that too, because I think design thinking and all others process and approaches is very important, but also understand about your limitations as a designers is, I think, and humility is, I think, one of the most important facts that we as a designer have to acknowledge, that we cannot solve the world by design alone. We need other people. And I think I really like the fact that you state that humility is one of is very important things when you're trying to solve a problem, because you need to involve other people into your problem.
Yeah.
So let's looking back a little bit about when you first started as a designers. So what do you think about some challenges that you have faced while navigating yourself as a young designer in the US, like back there in the day?
I think being arrogant is a problem that young designers face, and I definitely face that problem. Just
yourself as young designers.
That's the question, right? It's like, what problems did I experience as a young designer that might be useful to other young designers?
Yeah.
As a young designer in the US, yeah. Having a lot of confidence is really great. Being arrogant about it is, I think, a real problem. And so there's a thin line between confidence and arrogance. I think not really understanding the full context of design or how design works in the bigger scheme of things, how it works alongside with marketing, how it works alongside with, like strategy, with engineering. That's something that took me many years to really fully comprehend. And, acting without full knowledge sometimes gets you into trouble. And that's something that happened to me. And I think that many young designers are susceptible to. I think also just being, I think, maybe too heads down on my job and not really looking up enough and understanding like what was going on around me, like in my personal life and in like my family and my community around me. That's also something that designers sometimes fall prey to, because design can be so satisfying I mean, if you're the kind of designer who just loves to sit there and just like figure out problems in front of your computer and be in the zone, and the hours can go by, and then you wake up and you haven't really taken care of yourself, your health, your family, your loved ones. I think that's a trap as well for lots of people. So I think mostly being young is the biggest challenge to people who are young.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that's quite true for some people said, like, when you do art, don't look at art. Because like when you're doing your job, you shouldn't do your jobs like do it like you shouldn't do it like don't let it consume you, because they are part of your life, their personal life, your health problem, and other things as well, right? So it's a much more sustainable way.
Design is a great way to distract yourself from your own life, because it's like you control everything in your design, and you're doing real work. You're not like sitting around playing video games. You're actually making something that's going to be useful to somebody. That's a great excuse not to deal with the rest of your life.
Yeah, it speaks to me actually, because every time I have free time, I'm doing something else, not working. I feel quite horrible for not doing my job seriously.
Yeah.
So it's very good design, but a very good design advice. So from back then when the young designers to what you're currently now. So what do you think, how did you develop yourself to become a principal designer?
How
did you develop yourself to become what you are now?
I think 10 or 15 years ago, there was no such thing as a principal designer. So it's not like I had maybe there were, but very few of them. It wasn't like I had a grand plan to be a principal designer. I just, like, my goal was to become a successful designer. Like, I wanted to be, working on the things that interested me, and I wanted to have influence in how those problems were solved, and I wanted to have a good comprehensive understanding of how design works in the design industry at large, have good network, good connections. That's what I focused on, and to do that, to achieve those goals, I had to learn, like, self-motivation. I had to learn, to be an entrepreneur in many different modes, like not just like an entrepreneur of my own company, but also an entrepreneur in terms of like how to start something that nobody's done before and make it succeed. I had to learn how to relate to different kinds of people and talk to different kinds of people at all different kinds of levels. So those are the things that I think contributed to making me a suitable principal designer, when I got to Adobe. But again, like, that's the role of a principal designer is a recent invention. So I think it's just all about, sorry, it's loud here. I think it's just really about making yourself the best or the most functional designer, kind of designer that how, relative to like what interests you and what your passion is.
So your passion is what's driving you forward, right?
Yeah.
I really like that. So I think that's the last questions for today's sessions. Thank you, Khoi, for spending your precious time with us and sharing about your thoughts and experience about what to become a good designer and how's your life and your journey to become a principal designer is about to be. So our deep appreciation for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy New Year, everybody.
Yeah, Happy New Year to everybody too.